I just love when somebody pulls up next to me in their brand new Corvette or their Porsche, revving their engines, trying to get me to race them. Excuse me, I drive a tiny little V4 Nissan Versa. It's like the most dad vehicle of all time. I don't know exactly what you're trying to prove or who you're trying to flex to. I have a tiny little Nissan. This isn't like a scene from Fast and the Furious or anything crazy like that. This is real life, please. You're not a main character of planet Earth. Let's just be brutally honest. Anyways, all jokes aside, we have yet another top custom action figure video coming at you guys, and today we're going to be looking at the top DC Multiverse custom action figures online available right now. And I said I was going to start looking at social media for a few examples, but for some reason I still haven't gotten around to it. So everything will be based on like eBay sellers, which in most cases a lot of those are featured in social media posts and things of that nature, but I'm just going to stick to eBay right now. Eventually I do want to expand and include other sources of, custom action figures and things of that nature. And I've said this before and I'll say it again. I love putting these videos together. I love looking at people's creativity online. I love the fact that they give us variants of certain characters, and in some cases they give us some action figures based on characters that we've never seen in plastic form. So it's just a really cool, nice touch from the community, and it's always a ton of fun to put these videos and check out what crazy stuff people are putting together online. Now, if you guys are interested in just listening to me rant on about other stuff, not just action figures, we do have a second channel. So if you guys are interested in watching a little bit more of just our content, that particular channel is mostly like pop culture stuff, video games, films, things of that nature based in the comic book universe. So if you guys are interested in just overall watching random nonsense, definitely go ahead and check out that channel. But without further ado, let's get straight into the top custom DC Multiverse action figures out in the wild. And as always, I like to start off with the accessories, stuff that isn't necessarily considered an action figure, but you can add them to your figures, whether it's a display base or some weaponry or an extra head sculpt. I always like to start it off with an absolute bang, and the first item that I wanted to get into was this custom throne that, according to the description, could either fit a 1/12 scale collectible like a Marvel Legends action figure, or a 1/10 scale collectible, which would obviously veer closer to the DC Multiverse line. For me personally, at least from the promotional images or just overall the pictures that they have for this listing, I feel like the DC Multiverse fits in way better. Marvel Legends do seem to kind of like slouch in there. They're just a little bit too small for my taste. Now, I know the DC Multiverse has given us, I think up to this point, like maybe 2 different thrones, and I'm going off the top of my head, but I believe they included one with the live action Black Adam action figure, and then I believe they gave us one with one of the Lex Luthor power armor suits. I believe I have both of them, and they were kind of like cheap plastic. They were incredibly thin, but also somewhat sturdy, so they weren't like the worst thrones of all time, but they were definitely not as highly detailed as the one that this seller is offering. It looks really cool. I think it will be a beautiful display piece if you're looking to kind of spice up your display, which I've noticed is a kind of an issue in the community nowadays. Everybody just has like shelving and a bunch of action figures in upright positions. None of them are really posed. None of them are really doing anything, and so I think adding a throne in there would definitely kind of like spice it up a little bit. It would draw a little bit of attention to those particular spots on in your display. So if you're interested, these are available now, and they're actually somewhat affordable. These usually go for like very expensive prices. I've seen some that go as high as like $100. Obviously those are a little bit more intricate, but still very affordable. If you guys are interested, they're up now for sale. I also ran into this custom Hugo Strange 1/10 scale action figure head sculpt, and it's a little bit late because we are supposed to be getting a Hugo Strange disguised as Batman action figure soon. If I'm not mistaken, it's either already up for pre-order or it should be going up for pre-order at the moment of this recording. And I will be honest about that figure. I think it's absolute garbage. I think McFarlane is obviously going to release a legitimate Hugo Strange action figure, but hey, let's try to make even more money using these collectibles. Let's try to squeeze every penny out of our consumer base. Let's mix and match. Let's take this head sculpt, put it on a Batman action figure body mold, and then sell it as a disguised Hugo Strange. It makes no sense to me. And honestly, you may be better off, if you're not a big stickler for detail, you may just be better off buying the figure and then just using that head sculpt for a Hugo Strange. But I will say these are usually more intricate. They have a lot more detail to them. They have better paint applications. Obviously, the other ones are being mass produced, whereas in these are hand painted by like a legitimate customizer. So it's a really good looking head sculpt, and it will be a trend on today's video because it's relatively affordable. I mean, you're looking at about 30-35 bucks. If you guys are interested, keep this on your watch list. Not to mention there are multiples being made of these, so I'm assuming that the customizer is consistently making these as the orders come in. I also ran into two 1/12 scale head sculpts, and obviously these don't really fit the McFarlane DC Multiverse, but if you guys have older Mattel action figures or Mezco figures for that matter, these head sculpts should be able to fit those figures. Now, it's worth noting, I don't really collect Mezco figures. I have seen somewhat of a trend of people posting a lot of Mezco head sculpts as like custom head sculpts and then, you know, pretending like they're their own creation, but I'm not really too familiar with them, so I wouldn't be able to tell you if they are or they're not. But they do have an unmasked Hush Bruce Wayne head sculpt available, as well as a Red X head sculpt, and they both look absolutely amazing. I'll be brutally honest, I've read so many different comic book storylines that I forget exactly what Bruce Wayne looks like in every single one of those, but that definitely looks like a Hush head sculpt. Phenomenal paint job, great sculpt work, and the Red X is a little bit simpler, but that's really what they're going for. We've never received a Red X action figure that I can remember. He's definitely a newer character, and if I remember correctly, his first appearance in comic book form definitely had a huge impact in the comic book community. So as I said before, it's really nice when they give us new head sculpts for newer comic book characters. And then lastly, for accessories, they did have this Michael Keaton 1989 Batman wired cape. Looks phenomenal, looks great. I love the way that it looks when it's expanded. If you already have a Michael Keaton Batman and you want to give him an insane crazy upgrade, now is your opportunity to pick up this cape. Not to mention is going for $18.99 free shipping. Even with taxes, you're paying about $20. And I know it seems kind of high because now you can pick up a McFarlane action figure with a cloth cape for about $25, but you have to keep in mind these are third-party sellers. They can mass produce all of these collectibles or all of these accessories. That some of these have to be crafted by hand, and it takes quite a bit of work. So it's definitely a very affordable price. Usually wired capes can range anywhere from like mid-teens, so like anywhere from like 14 to 15 all the way up to like $25 to $30. So this one is somewhere in the middle. It looks big, it looks like it's using some high quality product. So if you guys are interested, now is your opportunity to jump in on this. But enough of the accessories. We're here to talk about the best custom DC Multiverse action figures, and the first one that I wanted to throw up on today's list is this really crazy Duke Thomas repainted action figure. And from what I can tell, it's only a repaint. He's using like a really dark black paint and maybe a wash on it, and then he painted this customizer painted kind of a laser beam red on the visor. I'll be brutally honest, I don't quite remember this particular storyline with Duke Thomas. I'm not sure if this is more comic book accurate, but I will say it definitely stands out in the display a little bit more. I love that red on the visor. It really makes it stand out. And if I'm being honest, I wasn't a huge fan of the Duke Thomas action figure. It obviously had some really cool, unique sculpt work to it, and the head sculpt was really interesting to look at, but it just really never resonated with me. And if you want to upgrade that figure, now you have an opportunity to do so. And it's just worth mentioning, this custom is going for just a little bit over $50 with taxes and everything included, which isn't really that bad. I've said this before, usually custom action figures, regardless of what character it is, regardless of how intricate the custom work is, usually they go for roughly about like 100 to maybe 120, and some go even higher than that. but to find a custom action figure for about $50 to $60 is always an absolute bargain. It may have something to do with the fact that the character isn't as well known by action figure collectors as a whole. It's mostly like people that collect comic books or read comic books. Regardless, it looks phenomenal. Great job on this repaint of this figure, and if you guys are interested, like I said, very affordable price point. Speaking of incredibly affordable customs, we have this steel action figure from the DC Multiverse, and this one is actually from McFarlane. Same thing with Duke Thomas. This one's really interesting. I believe I saw, and I actually featured it in one of our videos, but we had a steel action figure very similar to this one. I believe the only real difference is that one was like included with the packaging, like they actually introduced it back into the packaging and then they were selling it like that, whereas in this one I think is being sold loose, but really not that big of a difference. This is a repaint of that original McFarlane figure. I think the only real difference is they're repainting this and then adding a wired cape. If that's really worth to you, you can now pick this up, but again, worth mentioning, it's only going for about $45 to $50. That's an absolute bargain, because this figure originally was just like very dull gray plastic, but they really gave it some shine. They really gave it some spark. It's going to stand out, and that wired cape just looks absolutely phenomenal. If you try actually doing this custom yourself, it may be a little bit cheaper, but even then I think the figure retails for about $20. The cape is going to cost you about another $15 to $20, and then let's say you do buy a bottle of paint, but you know, obviously you're not going to use all of it on the figure, but you still have to account for that. It's definitely, I think it goes over budget compared to what this this customizer is asking for. So I think this is definitely a figure, if you guys are interested, to pick up. It's a great deal. It's a great bargain. You're paying about $50 for a figure that actually looks phenomenal in your display, and it's a very iconic character in any Superman display for sure. Now, the next figure on today's video is actually a pretty interesting one for a number of different reasons. Number one, it's actually one of my favorite DC Multiverse Batman action figures out there, and that's kind of a little bit weird because I don't really collect a lot of live action DC Multiverse. I usually stay away from that just because they tend to cut corners here and there, but for the most part, this is a really good solid figure. Cloth cape, and you know, it did come with its issues. I think like the back was missing a lot of paint, and then it didn't come with the wired cape, but those were minor little issues. I mean, overall the figure was really well designed, really well put together, and with this particular custom, it essentially upgrades that figure. The head sculpt is designed to look much closer to the resemblance of Ben Affleck. So if you're really a stickler for tiny little details like that, I guess you can pick this up. As I said, it's not like the biggest upgrade in the universe. I couldn't really tell if there was an extra wash, and then I believe like some details were painted around the chest area, like the cuts, and then the knuckles I think were painted a little bit differently to resemble his appearance in the Batman vs Superman Dawn of Justice film. So like I said, it's not like a huge upgrade, but it's enough to really bring out a lot more detail in this particular figure. So if you guys are interested, you can now pick this up. The price point is a little bit hefty. You're looking at about $80, but as I said, if you're a big stickler for, you know, minor little details, you'll absolutely love this figure. And then lastly, we do have this custom Hush Superman DC Multiverse action figure, and I read a little bit of the description that the seller put up, and essentially he repainted the skin color tone on the Superman to make it look a little bit more tan, a little bit more natural. I believe the original was kind of like a little bit pale, and so if you prefer a Superman that is a little bit more aesthetically pleasing, I think this one will be a perfect addition. The seller or the customizer also made a mention in that description that they also did a bit of resculpting to the head sculpt. If you guys have played around with this figure, you guys will know that for some unknown reason, this particular Superman had a lot of trouble with the head articulation, so it wasn't able to look up extremely well, and so this particular customizer went in there and, you know, did all of that to better articulate the figure, which is something that you rarely see with customizers. Usually it's something somewhat superficial, like a repaint, maybe just like an alternate head sculpt, or even like an alternate cape, like maybe a cloth cape or a wired cape, but you rarely see these customizers go in there and resculpt figures. And just from reading the brief description, it gives me a pretty solid idea that this particular customizer definitely has quite a bit of experience, at least from the way that he was explaining how the figure came together. So if you guys are interested, this is a phenomenal custom. And I'm starving, so I'm about to go into my kitchen and just stuff my face. But hopefully you guys enjoy this type of content. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. If you guys do, don't forget to let me know down below what kind of stuff do you guys like to see from the channel. And also stay tuned, because we do upload stuff like this pretty consistently, where we just ramble on about action figures. Also make sure to check out our playlist, so we have older videos that are essentially, you know, somewhat similar to today's video. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Stay safe, and as I always love to say, make sure that you enjoy the hobby. That's the most important part of this entire thing. I'll see you guys in the next one. Thank you.